Welcome to the Out of Home Insider, the loudest voice in out of home, bringing you tips, tricks, and insider insights. And I'm really excited to share today's guest with you because if there was a royal family of out of home, he'd be the Jack of Hearts, none other than Mr. Daniel Wilkins from AGENCY672. Daniel, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you come from a lineage within the out-of-home space. Tell us about how you were first exposed to out-of-home and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. So I was first exposed to out-of-home, I think, when I was born. My father is Bill Wilkins. He's a member of the Out-of-Home Hall of Fame. He got his start in his early 20s in the 50s. And out of home on the lease acquisition side, and moved into sales, worked for Don Ray and Foster and Kleiser, ran the plant in Las Vegas in the 70s, which he's got phenomenal stories about. That was a great time to be there. And eventually made his way to Chicago, and then took a job as the head of the Institute of Outdoor Advertising, the IOA, before it merged with the OAAA, and ran that organization. It was primarily the marketing arm for the out-of-home industry. So he would go meet with Coca-Cola, Budweiser, the big advertisers, and tell them all about the wonderful things of out-of-home. And in the process of doing that, he found that, you'd have these meetings and they'd say, "Great, we love outdoor, we love the idea. Can we just work through you guys?" And he would say, "Well, no, we're a trade association. You actually have to call the individual vendors." And they're like, "Well, we don't want to call 7, 8 vendors. We want to just work with one group." And, he tried, I think, once or twice to take IOA private to be that service for the major advertisers, and wasn't able to do that. So he bought a small rep firm in Roswell, Georgia, what became Sandy Springs, Georgia, in 1986. And I was 5 at the time, and we moved down here, and he abolished the exclusive agreements that rep firm had, and essentially became a rep firm for the out-of-home industry as a whole. No exclusive agreements. And at the time, billboards, real simple, traditional stuff. And it was called Wilkins Outdoor Network. And in the early 90s, he changed it to Wilkins Media Company because it started to encompass more forms of out-of-home as they came about. And so I grew up going to all the conferences, and knew everybody, and everybody knew me as Bill's son. And I would just run around at the conferences, probably annoy everybody. And but I never really understood what he did. Never had any dreams to get into the business. And then I graduated high school, and my dad asked me, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go to Georgia State and get a business degree." And he said, "Great. What are you going to do with that?" I said, "Well, business." He's like, "Well, that's great."
Like millions of Americans, we're going to school for business.
Well, yeah, like, what else am I going to do with a business degree? I'll do business. And he said, "All right, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you come work for me for a semester and start in the spring, and then maybe that 3 or 4 months can inform your decision of where you want to go with that degree." And I did, and it was only supposed to be temporary. And one semester turned into 2, and 2 turned into 3. And say we were maybe about a year and a half in, and we sat down and had a conversation about whether this was going to be long term, or if I was going to go ahead and go to college. And at the time, I liked what I was doing, and it was starting to actually make sense. And so I decided to stay on. And so we had a handshake agreement. He said, "Look, I'm a little bit older, so I'm 38. My father's 83. So he was sort of at the tail end of his career. And he said, 'I've only got so much time to teach you this business. So you're going to be on the fast track. And the second you can't handle it, you're out. I'm not going to keep you around just because you're my son. Doesn't mean I don't love you, but that's the way it's got to be.' And he said, 'But at the same time, if you don't like it at any time, just tell me, and you won't hurt my feelings, and we'll part ways.' And so we did, and that was that. And I worked in every department of Wilkins Media Company: accounting, contracting, marketing, sales, management, and moved to New York, did sales in New York for Wilkins in the early 2000s, and then came back and was running the company from 2006 2007 till we sold the business in 2012.
It's an incredible story. And the reason I ask is a little bit selfish because my son's going to turn 7 later this month. And, even just in my short time being in out of home, it's something that he's gotten into because he thinks it's cool. He thinks billboards are neat. We see him when we're on the way to the hockey game and he sees his team up there, or he sees things that he recognizes from playing a video game. He goes, "That's DJ Marshmallow. How do you know that?" Well, from Fortnite. So there's this great social connection. I appreciate you sharing your experience coming up through that. Was there ever a point where you're like, you know what, I don't think this is for me? Or did you just know it was in your DNA?
Funny enough, I think the only time I thought that it wasn't for me was by the time we sold in 2012. I'd been running Wilkins for 4 or 5 years. And, at that point, as the CEO of the company, I wasn't doing what I actually enjoyed doing, which was the planning and being creative and working with the clients. And I didn't really get to spend very much time developing the relations, continuing to develop the relationships that I had with the vendors, from the previous 7 or 8 years. And so I found myself just either kind of putting out fires with my employees or with my vendors or with my clients. And to be honest with you, by the time I was so exhausted by it at the time, I honestly don't think I was quite mature enough to be doing what I was doing. But I thought I'm like, well, I'm done with the industry. I don't want to do this anymore. And it really was more about, at that age, I again, just don't think I was mature enough to really be managing 20, 25 people and dealing with the things that came with that. I just wanted to be everybody's friend. I didn't want to, deal with the conflicts and the things that you have to as a mature business person. And so I stayed on with Wilkins for a little while. I thought maybe it would work. And I think about a weekend, I figured out that wasn't going to be the case. And so I left, and in that time period, I thought maybe I'll go work for an agency and get some other advertising experience. I know advertising, I can walk in that door without a college degree and be able to pick up and start running. And quite frankly, it was, we sold 2012. So we were on the up-ish turn of the recession. But it was still a period when, nobody wanted to look at, a 30-year-old resume with CEO and all that kind of stuff on it. I found it really difficult to get my foot in the door in the traditional agency sense. And I ended up going and working for another at-home buying service on the West Coast for a little while. And, that worked out for about 6 months. And then I launched AGENCY672. And when I launched AGENCY672, the idea was I want to do all the things that I want to do and I want to outsource the things that I don't. I want to pay my bills doing that. So, I outsourced accounting, outsourced the things that I wasn't really comfortable doing, and then just really concentrated on providing service and my expertise in out of home to clients and agencies. And it worked. And I realized I do still love being in this industry and I do love what I do. I just didn't really want to do the management part of it, I guess.
I give you a lot of credit because it's the archetypal, hero's journey, right? Where we've ascended, we've crested the mountain, and then there's this challenge. We fell out of love with the thing with the mountain, with the journey that we just submitted ourselves to, and then sometimes have to rediscover ourselves. So you've done that with AGENCY672. Social impact has really been a core pillar of why you do what you do. How do you see social impact at play today in out of home in a time where we're confined to our homes? How do you think that those two things work together?
Well, I think the out of home industry is uniquely positioned in terms of its very public facing identity to educate and build awareness for causes and different social impact initiatives. I didn't really intend necessarily to get into that part of it. A close friend of mine launched a nonprofit as sort of an alternative to the ad council called Public Foundation. And so when I launched AGENCY672, he was using my expertise and my relationships to help access for pro bono space for the different causes we were working with. And, through a series of events, I found myself the executive director of that organization as well. So I straddle both public works, not only in out of home, but in all forms of media. And so I really got exposed more to what was going on the social impact side of things, how to use our powers for good and the power of media to affect change. And we've been a part of some really amazing campaigns addressing sexual assault with the Obama administration called It's On Us. We've worked on things for PETA. We've worked on things for other animal rights issues. I mean, we've really touched pretty much every cause there is, and we do a tremendous amount of work with the UN. Right now, we're planning some things with the UN and the WHO around Corona information, and I love what the industry is doing in terms of social impact and things in this particular environment. Quite frankly, I think what's interesting is that stuff is good. What I'd really like to see, and I think where an opportunity is being missed from the out-of-home community, is extending that goodwill to the small business community. It's great to talk about social distancing. It's great, but I think we're getting hammered, especially at this. We've been doing it for 6 weeks now. I think there's an opportunity that's being missed for the out-of-home industry to extend that goodwill to the small business owner that needs to use the power of our media right now to stay in business.
How should out-of-home companies or agencies be approaching that conversation? Trickier, even so, on the agency side, right? Because you need to, satisfy both parties. But what could we be doing that we're not in terms of supporting those local restaurants, local businesses that are still open that you would like to see that maybe is not being done at scale?
I think every operator needs to approach it on a case by case, really down to the plant level. They'll know their local business partners, who does business with them frequently that has now dropped off. In my experience, most of the time, the local sales managers and the reps have really good relationships with their local clients. They may have Sunday dinners with them, whatever the case may be. And I would imagine they've got a pretty clear finger on the pulse of what's going on with those customers. So you could look at it from extending opportunities, limited opportunities to your historically ongoing local clients. It's also an opportunity to bring in local clients that maybe hadn't tried out of home in the past. And, it's just, there's open inventory. There's enough inventory, I think, to go around for the social messaging things, and then make 15% of your digital inventory available to local businesses and rotate them in and out every other week, something like that. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you can cut and dice it, but with the fact that it's digital, there's no printing costs. You got 6 to 8 spots per location that you're rotating. I doubt anybody's sold out at this point. It just seems like another step that the industry could take to show that it's here for businesses, small businesses in particular, for the long term, and that they're invested in them. I mean, it's a massive part of our business, and it just feels like they're getting left behind a little bit.
Speaking of the industry taking the next step, it's sort of a point of contention. We're seeing, some studies, some reporting. Geopath has released a little bit of data now. There seems to be two sides behind the impression conversation right now. The traditional legacy mindset of don't release this information, it's going to damage, the out-of-home space. And then there's the other side that says, no, release it. It's going to legitimize our case as we go through this. What are the long-term ramifications of that conversation? Which side wins, and why is that a good thing?
I think honesty and transparency, especially within the out-of-home community, wins out long-term every day. I mean, the rub on out-of-home has always been sort of the fuzzy math behind the numbers. And this is an opportunity to show transparency, to make the adjustments in the impressions, make the adjustments in the rates, keep advertisers on the space. And if you're transparent and they understand and everyone agrees on the numbers that are reduced, then to me that logically says that they should then, when things start to turn around, have faith in the numbers as they come up and be willing to pay more accordingly. That just seems like a logical relationship to me. I think that also allows us to start moving towards raising the rates more quickly. I mean, I think we know people are on the roads. Advertisers don't think they are. We do know they're there. So the sooner that we can just say, look, it's not as bad as you think. Here are the numbers. Here's how we got there. Okay, that makes sense. Here's how we've adjusted the rates accordingly. Okay, that makes sense. And then as soon as things starts to turn around, we can say, okay, look, things have gone up 20%. So rates are going to go up 20%, whatever the relationship is. It allows us to get back to normal quicker. If we pretend that there isn't an issue, people are going to continue to think that we're not transparent or that we're hiding something, and they're not going to trust what we're saying. So that when we come back and we say, no, people are back, they're going to say, well, all right, maybe. And it's going to be on their terms of when they feel people are back, not on when we tell them through data when they are. And you can't sit here and say, we're not going to release the data. And then surely you're going to release the data when the numbers come back up. So it's like, why didn't you? You have to be transparent end to end. And I think that builds trust long term. And it really starts to change the conversation around how out of home addresses its numbers. That's been a legacy issue. This is the perfect opportunity to do that. And I think we're a little late. It's good to see that Geopath released that data. I think it's a step in the right direction. We're not quite there yet, but for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been talking about programmatic and how we've got our finger on these numbers and the data is so rich and we know everything that's going on. And then all of a sudden, nobody can come up with the numbers. And that to me is I'm in it, I'm committed to it, and I'm still scratching my head saying, I don't understand that.
Sure, it just doesn't. You got the whole equation, but it doesn't add up. It doesn't quite make sense. So, and on that transparency, you talked a little bit about the business model-ish of AGENCY672, right? We're going to outsource the things that we're not necessarily the things that you want to do. Let's focus on the things that we do and keep the passion pure. What is it that makes AGENCY672 so unique for advertisers, for your clients?
So I think it's the one-on-one direct conversation with the business owner, the decision maker, 20 years experience in the business. We've won accounts, maintained accounts, competed against some of the larger buying services that have 50 to 100 people in them. And, one of the things that we always come back to is you're more responsive, turnaround is quicker. We know that we're getting a decision. I get to make the decisions about my business directly with my clients. It's not necessarily a young buyer and things like that. That's not to say that there aren't advantages to having a large staff and a big buying team and all of those types of things. But I think where we really stand out is in the service side of it and how nimble and quick we can move.
I think that's been a unique condition of our current environment, is that it's really snuffing out the teams that are able to deliver a high-end customer experience because it's in their DNA, right? This is just a changing of format. It's just changing the way we interact. The teams that weren't necessarily good at have certainly been challenged by this. Daniel, you're on record 5-6 years ago talking about digital screens becoming more interactive, that as a trend for out of home, and you were spot on. We're in, I hate to use this term because everybody is, we're in unprecedented times. What's your prediction 5 years from now? How is out of home changed from this?
5 years from now, I think if we're going that far out, I think in terms of getting back to the growth and to the robust business environment that we had over the last couple of years, I think we're back there. I think where I'm a little bit more bearish is on how quickly we come out of the situation that we're currently in. I've seen some thought pieces and some things that have come out relative to, out of home's going to come out hot, and here are all the reasons why. And I don't think we have enough information to make those types of predictions right now. We don't know if people that get this are immune to it. If they are immune to it, how long are they immune to it? We don't have a reliable treatment for it. There's talk of a second wave coming in the fall, potentially. So I think until a lot of those questions are answered, we can't even get to then, well, what does life look like as we start to go back on? I mean, a lot of those thought pieces that I read seem to assume that we're just going to flip back on the light, and then it's going to be this V shape in terms of, our decline and our coming back. And I hate to be pessimistic about it. I think I'm trying to be realistic, is that I just don't think it's going to be that way. I don't think right out the bat we're going to be allowed to go back to restaurants. I mean, you could say, well, you can social distance at a restaurant, but can you? I mean, you're still sharing bathrooms. You're still talking about people's saliva on plates. You're still moving things around. That waiter goes table to table to table. Some of the pieces I saw talked about, people's eagerness to get back to sporting events and things like that. I would be amazed if there is one fan in an NFL game this season. I think the seasons will go on. I think they'll be to empty stadiums because the broadcasting rights are the most valuable component for those organizations. So not they don't need the fans, but there will be an appetite for the games, and people will watch at home, and they'll preserve their broadcast rights. I don't think people are going to be going to concerts right off the bat. I don't think people are going to be gathering in large groups. I think that coming out, you'll see more. Bill's put out a great piece about hyper-local and how that sort of, traffic patterns are changing around that. I think that will be the case for a while. I mean, when people start going back to offices, you'll see commuter traffic come up and things like that. But I do think people are going to be staying closer to home outside of their commutes to work. I think social distancing is here for a minute, and we're just going to have to get used to that. In terms of interactivity, just sort of general trajectory of growth and changing in our industry. I made that prediction 5 or 6 years ago, and while it may have been correct, I think I was actually speaking more in like 18-month terms. So I might have been, macro correct, but I was thinking in the micro. In fact, in 2008, I launched the first private division that just worked. It was called N Squared, and all we did was the digital play space, and was really placing a bet that was going to take off. And the way I looked at it at the time was, these are mini cable networks, right? You've got specific audiences that go to specific types of venues. And my bet was, well, you'll see content start to represent that, right? You'll see custom content made for these environments, for these particular viewers, and then the advertisers will follow, same way that they do on television. And it just didn't happen. It's like weather, news.
Sure.
Like, I get that on my phone, and what's really started to happen since then is, if I'm standing in line somewhere, I'm on my phone. Whatever the screen in the environment has to be showing me something I can't get on my phone. And it just, I still to this day cannot understand why certain networks and organizations that have really unique environments didn't go find online short form content partners to create some sort of syndicated, symbiotic relationship. I always use the example of, if I owned a health club network, I would have gone to Funny or Die or College Humor, one of these things, and I'd say, create a funny, short form, gym based, comedic episode of something. Or why wouldn't you go to Men's Health and Fitness and Women's Health and Fitness and say, look, your readership is down. I have your audience. Why don't you create custom content for me in the short form? We'll link back to long form on your website, trying to get people to go in between the two things. It's just, I never saw, maybe the money wasn't there, maybe, I don't know, whatever, but I would like to see that in the future. I really believe that these networks are going to stay around. The content, and you do see it in some cases, but I'd like to see something more to really go out into there's so much short form content providers online now that are looking for additional places to run their content. There've got to be people that want to make deals. And I think if you're going to get somebody to look up from a phone, standing in line somewhere or sitting in a waiting room or something like that, you're going to need to provide content that gets their eyeball on the screen. And I think that's one of the components that gets missed when we start looking at impressions for digital play space and things like that is, well, that's great, I'm in the room, but how do you start discounting for however many people are on their phone? and not paying attention particularly to the ads. And I think we'll see a change in that. I just couldn't imagine these screens stay around, do well, and continue to just run weather.
Makes sense. And it tees up perfectly for my question about measurement, not just for the place-based screens, but we've seen it across the board, right? Advertising spends compressed, makes sense. IAB put out a great report on it. With out of home, and there's still being that question about measurement, what needs to change in the conversation right now to facilitate a successful platform when advertisers do get back into the game? For even just local, small business owner, why should I do a billboard instead of a Facebook ad? What should operators be focused on? Is it training? Is it education for their teams? Is there something more we can be doing as an industry to educate the small business owners of how out of home works? Where do you see an opportunity there?
I mean, I think the most immediate opportunity, while technology continues to evolve into a way that allows us to measure out of home more accurately and more similarly to what we see online, is to talk about how, not necessarily either or, right? Out of home is a 1 + 1 = 3 proposition. And we never go into a client and say, yeah, look, I see what you're spending in digital. Listen, you don't need to be doing that. You need to be moving that money into out of home, and these are the reasons why. It's always like, well, let me know what you're doing. Tell me what you're doing. What's your current strategy? Okay, here's your current strategy. Great. Let me tell you about how outdoor is going to goose that for you. Let me show you how much more effective your dollar is going to be. If you're spending $50,000 in digital, let me show you how another $50,000 in out of home, using those two things together, makes your ad budget run like a $200,000 ad budget. Let us show you how there's an amplification effect when you add in out of home, and how it complements your current strategy. And I think that is the place where the salespeople should really be focusing on, is they really need to go learn more about online and more about how other media positions itself to advertisers, and then really get to know that media so you can talk about the ways in which out of home can enhance it. It's really difficult to go in and talk about how out of home is going to enhance a digital budget, or even if you want to go in and fight against a digital budget and make an argument for why they needed to move money out of it, you need to understand what you're talking about. I've seen a lot of conversations about, ad fraud and fake impressions and all those types of things. And that's true, that does exist for sure in online. But if I'm buying online, even if there's fraudulent ads, I still know with certainty what is working. And I can work around that. I can say, okay, well, if 75% of what I'm buying is fraudulent, I still know what the hell the 25 is doing, and I can plan around that. It's more difficult to do that in out of home. And so, technology's changing, things are changing. I have concerns about, if the mobile companies move away from IDFA, which is how they identify an individual cell phone, mobile phone out in the world. If they move away from that, how does that affect the entire foundation that the metrics for our industry is based off of? It's based off of mobile phone data and watching travel patterns and where people go, and the cookies that are attached to that tell you who that audience is, especially in the programmatic side of things. What happens if they do away with that? What happens if that granular data isn't available? What are the workarounds? Do the workarounds work for our industry? That's something that I have my eye on down the road as a potential concern for how we're currently measuring and talking about our value proposition. But again, I think being really well educated about not necessarily who you're selling against, but who you're selling out of home as an enhancement for is key.
I totally agree. It's something that I've committed myself to personally, and I do a weekly live session, and a lot of account executives from outdoor companies are attending, because it's exactly that conversation. Here's how out of home are just like Facebook ads, because your small business owner has probably done a Facebook ad, and if you can make this intelligent case to them, they'll go, oh, that makes sense. And we can create a conversation from there. So I'm with you. We'll continue to push that forward. Daniel, what are you working on right now? Is there anything you want people to check out, or how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. So, I mean, you can check out our website. We launched a new website at the beginning of this year, www.agency672.com. I got to be honest with you. I wish I could say I was working on a lot currently. The RFPs have definitely dropped off. A big focus of mine has been the work with public and the things that we're doing around some PSAs and some different things in that area. But yeah, just check out the website, and you can check us out on LinkedIn as well. We're trying to keep small business up to date on the different things through my foundation that I come along that have to do with lending and grants and different things that pop up for specific areas. I'm trying to post that kind of stuff as much as possible, just to keep the small operators and fellow small business people up to date on ways that they can access capital outside of PPP and an EIDL loan.
And we'll link out to that in the show notes, so that anybody who is seeking that information out will make it really easy for them to connect with you. Daniel, on behalf of everybody listening, thank you for the time. Thank you for sharing your insight. If this has been helpful for you and your network, please, I encourage you to share it. And as always, go ahead and click the subscribe button below, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Tim.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great. I appreciate it.
It was fun.
Very fun. You're doing great. How many